Welcome back. We'd like to proceed with panel 4 now, titled Public Diplomacy and Global Media. It gives me great pleasure to turn the floor to Sean Lim, who happens to be my co-anchor for Primetime News. He also anchors for the late night edition at Arirang TV. He's been with Arirang since 2008 and has had a varied media background, from doing non-profit theater in San Francisco to working for one of Hollywood's top talent agencies. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sean Lim. Sean, you have the floor.
All right, thank you, Jie. So we're going to be talking about public diplomacy and global media. And I know when Jie and I entered Arirang in 2007, 2008, we knew that going into a global broadcaster like Arirang, as opposed to maybe a commercial broadcaster, would entail a bit of a state-directed initiative, that there was a bit of Korea-centric mission that we had to uphold in our media products. But I think the people who are coming in now in 2013, they also have to think not only about Korea's message to the world, but also a global message, and a message that I think we're all trying to find the specifics to at this forum today. We have a line of very distinguished guests. Let me briefly introduce some of them, or all of them. We have Professor Byung Jong, and he's a professor at the GSIS from Sookmyung Women's University, the Seoul correspondent for Newsweek. And his left, Assemblyman JaeYoung. He's on the Strategy and Financial Committee, and he's previously with the World Economic Forum. Ambassador for Public Diplomacy, Young Ma of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and Trade, and Ambassador of the Czech Republic, Jaroslav OLSA. He also has had a lot of experience in Africa, so he's a bit of our Africa expert. Bruce SHERMAN, who you met this morning, Director of the Global Strategy and Development at the U.S. Broadcasting Board of Governors. And Mate SILHAVY, the member of the Trust for the Public Media Foundation in Hungary, and he happens to be the youngest member there, also a media expert. So, let's welcome them with a round of applause. So some of our panelists have created some very wonderful, beautiful PowerPoint presentations for us, and some have not. And I just wanted to open up the panel by having you guys introduce yourselves a little bit. If you have your presentation presented, if not, if you could just kind of give us a sense of what you think from your own viewpoint the past 10 years has shown in terms of public diplomacy and the global media.
Thank you again for coming to this forum, and thank you again Arirang TV and Korea Foundation for inviting us to this exciting and interesting session. I'm a professor at Sookmyung teaching international communication, and I myself was a journalist until not so long ago. So I have both academic ideas and professional ideas on our topic today, which is public diplomacy and global media. Why did we put these two topics together? That should be our first question to ask. What's the relation between public diplomacy and global media? My short and simple answer would be that public diplomacy wouldn't be possible without global media. Of course, I prepared some definitions of public diplomacy, but this is not my classroom, so I'll skip most of that. But if the purpose of public diplomacy is to, as we all know, to win the hearts and minds of public in foreign countries, what's the best way to do that? There could be many different ways, but media. There could be many tools. They talk about culture. In the previous session, they talked about art, exchange, education, knowledge. But of all those tools, I believe personally, media, particularly global media and international broadcasters, they are one of the most effective and efficient tools for public diplomacy. Because as we all know, today's public diplomacy, as opposed to old traditional diplomacy, is really engage foreign publics and expand, promote mutual understanding and prevent misunderstanding and so on. It's not, we used to talk about the concept of persuasion in public diplomacy. How can we change their viewpoint and how can we change their behavior so that our nation can have, can expand our national interests? But that's a very old concept. And I believe the new concept is how can we promote, their understanding of us and our understanding of theirs, and what other, better tools do we have other than media, particularly global media, today's media, combined with social media, which are very much two-way, very much multimedia, very much interacting. So particularly if you want to aim young people, how can you affect young publics in foreign countries? Of course, this new media, global media together can be the best tool. So we can talk about why public diplomacy is important, but I guess we have experts on that. So I'll focus more on global media. Throughout today, we've talked about this global media's role in 21st century. They play many different roles, but one major role they play is to enhance soft power of a particular nation. Arirang can enhance the soft power of Korea. Russia today can do the same thing for Russia. NHK World can do the same thing for Japan. We all know the difference between soft power and hard power alone is not enough these days to pursue national goals. So we focus very much on soft power. And again, global media can do that very efficiently. Again, I can go back to the tools of public diplomacy. We have media, exchanges, education, and culture, traditional culture, pop culture, as we discussed in the earlier sessions. Of course, Psy's Gangnam Style is one powerful means of public diplomacy. But together with global media, we all noticed last year how Psy's Gangnam media became so popular around the world. It started with media. I think global media, CNN, ABC, New York Times, all these global media started to report on that phenomenon called Gangnam Style, and it was soon picked up by social media like YouTube, and together, mass media and social media, together, they somehow helped create this Gangnam Style phenomenon. So very important in that sense. Maybe I can talk a little bit about global media's current situation. We all, I guess many of you are familiar with this term called CNN effect. That term, I think, was coined some 20 years ago when the war in Iraq, the first war in Iraq, started. CNN had a tremendous impact on the coverage of the war, but also at the same time, they had tremendous impact on foreign policies of the US government. I guess it was George Senior Bush who said that, because he relied so much on CNN, to find out what's happening in Iraq, he said he learned everything about the war through the CNN, not CIA, and CIA must have been very unhappy at that time. But that's the situation, of course, and that was more than 20 years ago. So again, these Western countries, particularly US media, with this new technology of satellite TV, they were able to reach every corner of the world without much difficulty. It has become very easy and inexpensive. But that was 20 years ago. Since then, a lot of things have changed. Evolution of global media, I can say. Of course, if you like to go back to the original history of global media, maybe we can go back to 150 years in the middle of the 19th century, starting with Western news agencies, companies like Reuters, AFP, later American news agencies like AP, UPI, they were the first, I guess, generation of global media, which were able to reach, all continents of the world. But more recently, moving forward about 50 years, we had the arrival of shortwave radio. I think many of you are familiar, particularly we have some gentlemen from Voice of America and BBC, because they were the pioneers in shortwave radio. In the early 19th century, early 20th century, BBC World Service and Voice of America, Radio Moscow, all these international broadcasters were created. And they were, again, very powerful and effective in reaching out to different publics in different countries. And they were very effective, I believe, particularly during the times of the Cold War, of course. We hear so much about how powerful Voice of America was during the 70s and 60s and 80s in the former Soviet Union and in the former Eastern European bloc, because they spread American messages, basically. American music, jazz music, rock and roll music, American culture, American blue jeans, even McDonald's, I believe. And some of that had great impact on the people, particularly young people in the East European community and the former Soviet Union. And many people argue that that was one of the reasons, why the Cold War ended. Maybe a little bit of exaggeration, but there's some truth to that, I believe. So they could be called the second generation global media, and they are truly international broadcasters. But more recently, we have a new generation of global media, new generation of international broadcasters. It started some 15 years ago. Companies like Arirang-TV, Russia Today, France 24, and Al Jazeera from the Middle East. They are the newest generation of global media, international broadcasters, which were not possible 30, 40 years ago for many reasons, technological reasons. It was difficult. But now everybody, every country, even a small country can start their own satellite TV. And they can reach 5, 6 continents of the world without spending much money. So almost every country is racing to set up their own international broadcasters, and they become fast global media because they reach global audiences. Of course, their influence is, compared to existing ones like CNN and BBC, limited, but influence growing because of all those changes in technology and things like the spread of English. So many people speak English these days. So countries whose mother tongue is not English, like Korea, Japan, China, they have English 24-hour channels, broadcasters, and they are becoming very powerful, I believe. We can skip this. Because of this importance and the influence of global media, many countries use media for their diplomacy, particularly public diplomacy. And I've already given you the examples and the reasons. I told you about the US and UK and Western countries, but think about countries like China and the Middle East with their own media diplomacy, trying to influence public opinion in the world. And we have seen the effectiveness of those efforts so far. Countries like Korea, it's a different story. We are not a superpower. We are not the US, we're not the UK. We cannot have our own CNN. So what we have been doing so far is, in terms of media diplomacy, we've really relied on Western media. CNN and the New York Times and BBC, they defined the news about Korea, and they defined how Korea is perceived outside Korea, and it was very powerful and important, and that will continue to be so. For many years to come. But at the same time, I would call that a kind of passive media diplomacy. You use media, existing Western media, for your national objectives, to spread your national culture and spread your messages, send out your messages. So many countries, particularly small countries, have been doing that for many years, for decades actually. But now it's a different time, different world. Now even small countries or middle power countries like Korea can launch their own media diplomacy with their own media outlets. It has started a long time ago with the internet, social media, but of those media tools, international broadcasters again, Arirang TV, NHK World, they can be again very crucial in sending out your messages, your values and ideas to the whole world and publics in other countries. And that's why we would like to discuss the relation between public diplomacy and global media. Of course, not everything is very optimistic. There are many